Hello, and slightly different video from usual. This time we're not going to be doing any flying. I wanted to talk to you about some FlyWithLua scripts that I've either written or copied to make the LES leading edge simulation Saab 340 easier to control basically and fly. A couple of reasons for coming back to the Saab. First of all, I'm fed up with the C90 catching fire randomly, and secondly, leading edge simulations are about to bring out, well, they've said it's been due for a while, so everyone's still waiting, but they're about to bring out a fixed release version of the Saab with a few fixes and tweaks for LES 11.5. Now the Saab version 151 works fine apart from a few oddities. Mainly the engines will overheat on start and when you move the prop pitch. Apart from that, the engines work fine in flight, and the autopilot kind of only does a half bank, which you can help it by just moving your yoke or stick a bit further to the left or right. But the new version is going to have various fixes and improvements in it, and everyone's waiting for that, and it's due out soon. So when that's out, obviously we're doing a lot more flying in it. So I thought I'd go over what I've done using FlyWithLua just to make some of the controls easier to set up. So first of all, let's jump into the cockpit and we'll take the controls one at a time. So the first thing that I kind of found annoying was the altimeter for the pilot is only in inches. Now if you go over to the co-pilot side, I have got a binding somewhere, you'll see it's actually in inches and millimeters. So what I was previously doing was getting the Qnh in hectopascals and then setting it here, reading off the inches, then coming back to the pilot's side and setting it up there. Instead, I can now do this, where if say it's 1012, I can move over here until I get 1012, and it's done for me. And after a couple of seconds, the tooltip goes away. And that's great, because now anytime I get a Qnh reading, say on VATSIM or something, the Qnh says local 1005, I just do this. I don't have to go, hang on, what's my co-pilot seat binding, how do I do this? So what's the magic to make that happen? Well, there's a few things. There's only a couple of things you need actually. It's pretty straightforward. The first thing you're going to need to do is install FlyWithLua. And you may have FlyWithLua already. FlyWithLua is maybe required by some of the other plugins you've been using, if you have got any other plugins. But otherwise, it's just a great way of dropping in some little scripts to enhance either X-plane behavior or a particular aircraft. You can get it from the X-plane forums, and it's a simple drop into your your X-plane resources plugins FlyWithLua, and then inside there's a scripts folder, and you can put Lua scripts in there. So, okay, get FlyWithLua. Then the next thing you're going to want is the script to do the metric altimeter thing. Now, I've got a GitHub repo here, and I'll put a link to that in the description. And this GitHub repo has got the scripts that I use with the Saab. And the Qnh Helper here is the one that's being used when you essentially when you change the baro setting on the altimeter. So let's have a look at the code for that. Let me just swap windows again. So let's have a look at VS Code, and it's decided it's not going to show VS Code for some reason. Okay, VS Code's an editor which you can use to edit Lua scripts. For some reason OBS is not going to play ball with it, so we'll just have a look at the code on GitHub. So Qnh Helper, I did copy this from one of the default example scripts that comes with FlyWithLua. If you go to FlyWithLua and you go into scripts disabled, there's a whole load of example scripts, and I think this Qnh Helper is pretty much an exact copy of the Qnh helper that's already there, only I slightly tweaked it to only invoke this function. So the way the script works is generally you'll define some data refs that you want to pull out from XPlane. You might set up some initial values for some variables, create some functions, and then a bit at the bottom will kind of be invoked. Anything that's not in a function will be invoked by the engine when XPlane starts up. And in this case, I'm doing a check to see if the plane that I'm flying, there's a plane ICAO is your script gets lots of predefined variables. If you look in the FlyWithLua docs, it explains which ones are available. One of them is plane code, and if it's the Islander or it's the Saab. The reason I've used a substring here is because there are two variants of the Saab. There's the passenger variant and the freighter, and this matches both. Then basically every XPlane window draw, every Lua draw, I'm not sure if that's maybe not quite as often as every frame, but anyway, it's like a regular repeat interval. Then it's going to invoke my Qnh helper function. Well, not mine, this is the one that was copied, and so the Qnh helper basically says is that if you've changed the QNH, then set the display end time to be 2 seconds plus the current time now, and if the clock is behind the end time, so within the little 2 second window, then create a message saying, doing the math to take the QNH pilot is a reading from XPlane, convert it to hectopascals, and stick it in a bubble on the screen, and that lasts for 2 seconds. Then obviously the clock moves ahead of the end display time and it stops, which means, going back to the screen, is you get the effect we've seen here where we start to change the QNH, so it's no longer the same as the last value. It triggers the display, and when you stop changing it, you then get 2 second display time. So that's the first script, and yeah, that one's really useful on its own. The next thing I'd like to look at is the lighting switches. Now, up on the overhead panel, you've got your taxi light, your strobe light, and your landing lights, and all of those you need to use basically every time you're setting off for flight. Taxi light first, then strobe and landing. And so the normal way you might attempt to use these, so what I like to do, I've got I actually use a joystick, not the yoke, but I've still got the Cytec throttle quadrant. So I use this all the time, every flight, for obviously throttle props, and if it's a plane with mixture. But I use these three buttons here underneath, they're rocker switches, 1, 2 and 3. I use these for lights. So I use the first one for taxi, second one for strobe, and the third one for landing. I just find that really convenient because you don't have to go hunting on the panels for them. And as you're setting off a taxi, you can press this one. Then when you get to the holding point for the runway, you can press that one and turn off the taxi. And then when you land, and you've gone off the active runway, you can turn off the strobe and the landing lights and turn on the taxi, all without having to look around anywhere inside the cockpit. So that's fine. If you go to XPlane setup, you'll find let's come back out of here. So this is my throttle quadrant. If I operate this button here, you'll see we've got turn taxi light on, turn taxi light off. Now I've searched here in all of XPlane's controls for taxi, and most aircraft in XPlane you can use these controls here: taxi light off and taxi lights on. But for the Saab they don't work. And there's some custom commands going on, and there's this leading edge simulations command, but it's only a toggle command, which means you can't have on and off. You could do something like set the rocker top position to be toggle, but then you've got to kind of remember if they're on or off and which way they're going to toggle. So I wanted these turn taxi light on and turn taxi light off, and that's what I've actually got the switch bound to. Similar for strobes, so we'll just have a look at the script. Let's have a look at the script for one of them. Let's have a look at the script for the taxi lights. And where was it here? If I go back here and look at the lights commands. So the thing that makes this work is that although leading edge simulations only exposed the toggle command in the control settings, there are actually data refs which are writable for actually setting them. I can't remember how this worked now. Anyway, it kind of doesn't really matter. Yeah, so what you can do inside the Lua script is in this function here, turn on taxi light. You can get the current position of the switch, and if it's off, then you can turn it on. Oppositely, conversely, for turn off taxi light, if the switch is on, then you can turn it off. What this all boils down to is I end up creating these new commands here. So create command is a built-in FlyWithLua thing that makes, and this is a really useful thing because it means you can create a command that then will appear in your X-Plane keyboard and joystick menu, and you can assign this command to a button or a keyboard button. So I've created these commands: taxi light on and off, strobe lights on, and landing lights. Now the landing lights are even more useful because if you look in the aircraft, you see that there are actually two switches for landing lights. There's left and right. Now why you would ever want to just turn one side on, I'm not sure, but I like my switch to operate both. So if we just zoom in a bit and I operate my the throttle quadrant switch, you can see both lights, both switches go on and off, and taxi obviously is just the one and strobe is just the one. Going back to the script, the custom command for the landing lights, so if we look at turn on landing lights, then we actually just do both in one. So we look at the left position if it's off and turn it on, look at the right position. So this function is actually doing two things. It's doing the left, turning on the left and the right, and the turn off is also doing the left and right. So anyway, the upshot of it all is this little script here gives you these new commands, taxi lights on off, strobe on off, landing lights on off, which you can bind to keyboard keys or to if you've got any switches on a joystick or a yoke or whatever. And yeah, that means the lights are now just sorted. I don't have to worry about the lights. I don't have to worry about going up here and trying to find the left and the right and turn them on. I can just use my switches. Okay, the final bit I want to look at is if we go back to the scripts, we've got I don't know what prop commands are. Oh yeah, I know what the prop commands are. Should we do the prop commands? Yeah, let's do the prop commands because they're kind of related to switches. For prop commands, I've got two new commands here: turn on prop sync, turn off prop sync, turn on autocourse, and turn off autocoursing. And these work similarly in that they use data refs and internal and the LES commands to basically give you on and off switches, whereas I think you only get toggle for one of them by default and the other one doesn't even exist in the standard LES commands. So let's just have a look at what that means. So on the Saab, after you've started the engines and before you take off, you want to turn on auto coursing, which is basically auto feather, which will feather a prop in the event of an engine failure, and that's this switch here. So normally you're down here and you're going, right, hang on, auto coursing, yep, on, okay, and then after climbing through about 1,000 feet, you'd turn it off again. So to avoid having to worry about looking up, I've again created the command which I've got buttons on joystick bound to, and I can toggle on and off with the joystick buttons. The other command was for prop sync. So prop sync's off. Prop sync is down here, kind of hidden by the flap lever, and prop sync is off for takeoff, and once you've gone through climb, done your initial climb above 1,000 feet, whatever, you auto course and off, prop sync on. They kind of go together. One goes off, the other goes on, and then that would stay on for the duration of the flight. When you're about to land, you would turn that back off again and put the auto course back on. So my second spare set of joystick buttons does prop sync on and off. So that's auto coursing and prop sync. The final 101, and potentially even more useful, just because it's very hard to do with a mouse, is the CTOT dial and the CTOT commands. Now then, if you're familiar with the Saab, you will know that you've got this constant torque on takeoff system here. I can't even get it to operate now. I can't even remember how you use it manually, but essentially there's a dial here. I'm not quite sure why that's not working. It should be. Maybe it's because the engine's not turned on. So what you do is before takeoff, you set, depending on the length of your runway and the weight in the aircraft, you set this to give you between 70 and 110% takeoff torque, and then you would arm the CTOT basically on the runway just before takeoff. And then as you advance the power lever here, once you get above about 60%, something like that, 60 degrees, CTOT system becomes armed, and you'll find then that the torque reading will go to what you've selected, so 90, 100, 110, and it will sit there solidly because there's automatic fuel metering then. It's basically excess fuel being injected into the engine to hold the torque you selected, which means you get the takeoff power you want without having to worry about continuously adjusting the power lever. And then once you have taken off and maybe you're about 1,000 feet, you then want to turn CTOT off, but you don't want to just switch it off suddenly. The way you want to do it is you want to wind back the dial, and at the same time you might need to slightly increase. Basically, I watch the torque gauge, and as I wind back the CTOT, if I find that my torque's actually dropping too low, then I'll just bump this at the same. So it's kind of like a balance. But if you've got your power lever in the right position anyway for what you want for your power after your initial climb, then you won't even need to do that. You would just wind this back and then turn off the switches. Now that is not easy to do. If you think about, you've just taken off, you're in the climb, you're trying to set your trim to get the airspeed you want, you're thinking about nav, you think about turning, then you get to about 1,000 and you're going, okay, hang on a minute, I need to pull back the props, I need to turn off CTOT. You're down here and you're trying to wind this dial back, and in the meantime you're not looking out the window, and then you're trying to. So I thought what we really want is to be able to operate the dial with an axis on the joystick or on the throttle quadrant. So that got me thinking, and I realised that I'm not using the red lever here with the Saab, because the Saab just has the power and the condition lever. The black one and the blue one. It doesn't need the red one. So that red one is spare. Could I use the red one to operate the CTOT dial? So if you go back to your settings, and I think I've got it on my. I have got it on here, haven't I? If you search for CTOT, so let's say, now how do we do this? It's one of the axes, isn't it? Yeah, it's this one. So the mixture, you'll notice, the mixture curve, this is the red one, is assigned to backup throttle. Now, there's no axis for CTOT. They didn't provide one. But backup throttle seems like a reasonable one to use. That's built into X-Plane. It's an axis that's available. I mean, these are all the axes that are available in X-Plane. So you could have picked any of the unused ones if you wanted, I guess, like gun, bomb, up and down, and stuff like that. Carb heat, maybe, but backup throttle seemed reasonable. So that's bound to the axis, which means that X-Plane will make backup throttle. Which means that when the red lever is moved, then X-Plane will deliver the 0 to 100 value of the axis in on this backup throttle data ref, basically. That's good. Of course, that doesn't do you any good on its own because the Saab's not listening for backup throttle. So that's where you need a FlyWithLua script to pick up the backup throttle axis setting and then operate the dial. So that took a little bit of fiddling around to try and find the way to set the dial position, and I found out there is a data ref. Let's just show you in the script. There's a data ref for the CTOT dial position. In fact, there's one for the CTOT dial, one for the position. I can't remember which way around they are. One's what it currently is, and one's if you want to set it. Although they're both writable here, so not entirely sure. What this Lua script does is, if it's the Saab, then every frame it does set CTOT. At the beginning, actually, before it does that, it finds the backup throttle axis. This is where it loops through all of the axis assignments that are in X-Plane, and it finds the one that is backup throttle, which is number 38, and it returns the index of that, which then lets you use a data ref to read the backup throttle axis. And so we've basically got one input and 2 outputs, I think. I can't remember exactly. And then the function essentially reads the value, gets the value from the axis, which is going to be 0 to 1. The CTOT dial has to be set between 0.7 and 1.1, so you can do 0.7 plus the axis times 0.4. Set the CTOT dial to that. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. All you got to do is install this script and it'll do it for you. And the net result then is that if we look at the dial here, if I now move my throttle quadrant lever, you can see this is it right down at minimum at 70, top at 110. So when I'm taken off, I can still be looking out the window. I can just pull the axis back, and if I need to, I can slightly bump the throttle forward. Then when it has pulled back, I want to turn CTOT off, so I use one of my joystick buttons to toggle the CTOT switches. And that is another script, which is this CTOT command. So I've got 3 commands here that you can bind to: CTOT toggle on and off. So on and off if you want them separately. I only really had like a single button, so I thought I'd bind it to toggle, because generally, you know, you're only turning it off once after takeoff. So toggle seemed fine. So yeah, after takeoff, pull back, whatever. Let's say you were at 95 or something like that. Get to about 1,000 feet, slowly move back, wind back the CTOT power so the normal throttle takes over, and then simply toggle the CTOT from armed to off with a single press on the joystick. And yeah, that's it. So next time, hopefully soon, I'll do a flight in the Saab. I won't bother going over all those Lua things again, but yeah, they're very useful, I find. So what I would say, if you want to use them, first of all, make sure you've got FlyWithLua installed. Secondly, go to my GitHub repo and get the scripts. I think you can just, yeah, you can. There's an option if you've not used GitHub before. If you have used GitHub before, then, you know, just clone the repository into your FlyWithLua scripts directory or into another folder and copy in the ones you want. If you don't want to use GitHub like that, then simply just download a zip file, and the zip file, I don't think we're going to show you, but the script file basically will have all the scripts in it, which you can then just drag and drop the ones you want into your FlyWithLua scripts folder. But yeah, as I say, I'll leave links in the description, and thanks for watching, and hopefully someone might find this useful. Okay, bye for now.